So I had this idea to sew a shirt that I came across on Depop, and I totally loved it. But one, it was already sold. Two, even if it wasn't sold, it was like 80 bucks. And my grandma just gave me a sewing machine that she got when she graduated high school. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'll make it myself. So here's a picture of the shirt. You can see that it has a pretty basic pattern, a little bit of a puffy sleeve, and hook and eyes in the front. And then here's the back. I should mention that this is just me going for it. I haven't sewed anything in a really long time, so I decided I'd draw out a pattern that I could use as a reference. I did not really know where to start at all. So here's what I drew. And once I sort of had an idea of what I was doing, I needed some measurements so that I knew how much fabric to cut out. So I measured my waist and my bust, and then I also measured the inseam from my armpit to about my wrist so I could see how long the sleeves needed to be. And I just kept track of them on the same paper that I drew out the shirt. So in hindsight, I probably should have not worn my overalls because it's kind of clunky and hard to get measurements from, but it ended up working just fine. So once I sort of had direction, I got my fabric and I laid it out on the table, and I had cut out panels from wrapping paper that were my guides since I was making my own pattern. This was like what I would use. And I actually really loved using the wrapping paper because there's a grid on the other side that was all square inches, so it made it really easy to do the measurements. So I took my pins and I pinned the panels of wrapping paper into the fabric just so that when I cut it out, it didn't like move all over the place and just cause havoc. Because there's enough of that, trust me. And let's see, it looks like I doubled the fabric here so that I just had to cut it out once, and then my two pieces of fabric would be the same. And I left a little bit of a border around the wrapping paper so that I could fold over the edges and hem it so that it would be like a sturdy seam. I don't know. And then I also realized that I had too much length on the shirt that wasn't in the sleeve, so I ended up folding a little bit and just cutting a longer sleeve. And then I am winding my bobbin so that I can sew. So here she goes. And then I had to FaceTime my grandma because I could not for the life of me remember the steps to thread the thread. So thank goodness for grandmas. So I got all the panels cut out and I folded the edges over twice and then pinned them down to keep it in place so that it would make the sewing process a ton easier. So here I am doing the first sew. Yeah. So when I would start a new panel, I would sew forwards and backwards a few times just to kind of solidify the stitches in place so that they would come undone less easily. So I'm just going forwards and backwards probably about 3 or 4 times. And it's so funny to watch like how careful and slow I was going because as this process went on, I got a little bit more reckless on the sewing machine. So as I would come up to a place that had a pin, I would just remove the pin and then continue sewing over it. So this is one of the front panels. And it was a little tricky to kind of go over the edges that had, a few sides folded under. So I just tried to keep like a steady pace with the needle and then just pull it straight on through. And I think this is one of the sleeves. Oh no, sorry, not a sleeve. This is one of the side panels, I think. The look of concentration. Oh gosh. So I just chose to sew all of the different panels on their own first before sewing them together. It was a little bit more work, but I think that it'll just make the shirt last longer. So here I am laying out the panels that I did, and it was really exciting because this is where it like started to take shape, and I was like, it's happening. So I just tried to make both sides symmetrical, and gosh, there were so many little strings everywhere. So once I laid them out, I just got my pins again and I pinned in on top of the seams. And just make sure if you decide to embark on this adventure that you match like which seams you lay on top. So if you're gonna lay like the front panel on top of the side panel on one side, make sure you do it on the other side just so it matches, unless that's not the look you're going for. Yeah. So then once again I sewed the front and the side panel together to make like the front of the shirt. And I just continued on that for the back panel as well and the back of the side panels. And here's me a few days later trying to figure out the sleeves. I wanted a little bit of a puff sleeve at the top and then a pretty straight sleeve for the rest of the way down. And I had issues, like major issues. I could not for the life of me figure out how to cut the fabric so that the top would still be connected and the seam would be on the bottom, even though I wanted like more fabric at the top. It was just really a mess. It took probably about, I don't know, 2 hours for me to sort out my dilemmas. So I started drawing a pattern on the wrapping paper, and then I cut it out, and then I realized, that's not going to work. I ended up just cutting out like rectangle pieces of fabric that were wide enough at the top to have a little bit of a puff, and then miraculously they fit the rest of my arms really nicely. So I don't know. And then I was like, I'm just going to lay out the fabric, see if I can figure it out by looking at it. That didn't do it either. So yeah, I also, rookie mistake, cut the fabric for the body of the shirt out, like not carefully enough. So I was concerned. I was like, do I even have enough of this fabric for 2 sleeves? Because I needed it to overlay for the front and the back of each sleeve. So I needed like 4 of these. And it was a little bit difficult. You can see me just like having long moments of like, oh gosh, how does this work? And then I kind of gave up and decided to sew the very bottom of the shirt because I had left it open just in case I needed to take off more fabric. And I actually wish I would have just waited till the very end to do this like I was planning on it, because I had to remove a little bit of fabric to add another panel. So, yeah, I ended up just sewing the sleeves, hoping they would work, and then sewing them onto the armholes that I left. I attached an extra panel along the back. This is before I did that, so yeah, it's a little bit confusing. I also didn't get like quite as much footage because I was frustrated. But this is me sewing one of the edges of the shirt, and to get the little like puffy sleeves, I just pulled one end of the string that was hanging out of the shirt, and it kind of ruched the fabric up, and then I just kept it ruched as I sewed it onto the sleeve hole. So yeah, there you have it. Enjoy this clip of me embarrassingly modeling the shirt.
Comme des origamis, le bras tendu pareil cassé, tout n'est qu'épié et clié. Ces enfants bizarres, crachés dehors comme par hasard, cachant l'effort dans le griffoir, et une creepy song en étendard qui fait